Welcome to this week's Fireside Chat with Jesse. I am joined today by Ken Pringle, Chief Operating Officer and owner of CPR Finance. Thanks for joining me, Ken.
Well, thank you, Jesse. Certainly appreciate it.
No, when you reached out a few weeks ago on LinkedIn and mentioned that you wanted to be a part of this series, and I kind of learned about your background in this industry, I'm like, where have you been for my last 18 years? Like, how come our paths have not crossed until now?
Yeah,
I appreciate your time today, sir, and look forward to kind of, discussing your career in equipment finance.
absolutely.
And just for the record, like your voice still, it's like an announcer type voice. Just, anyhow.
Hope it doesn't throw you off, but yeah, I did radio and TV for 6 years.
Fantastic. It's fantastic. I have a face for radio, but we'll see how the voice plays on here with yours. But for those people who might not be familiar with yourself, Ken, do you mind just kind of talking about your career in equipment finance?
Yeah. It actually all started back in 1984 with Eaton Financial Corporation out of Delaware. They were a third-party originations lender. Uh, we did chase a lot of different vendors throughout the years and really just cut my teeth in the industry at that point in time, right after the ITC went away. What I did not understand at that point in time was the ITC made most of the reps before me just order takers, where they really didn't have to make calls because clients were calling them saying, "Hey, I need to take advantage of this tax credit." And that's kind of a point in time in my life where I wish that would have still been around when I started, because everybody was
Sure.
making good money back then. But instead, they took it away, and I had to start cold calling from a Yellow Pages book. But went from there to Ameritech Credit, the baby bell companies here in the Midwest. Worked for them not only as a business development manager, but became their director of sales, and took over roughly 7 different states, and worked with the major distributor by the name of Nortel. And from there, Nortel had told me that they were looking to get a sales manager for them for the financing group. But it was through GE Capital, and asked if I would be interested in that. And they introduced me to the gentleman by the name of Steve Slinkard, who hired me right on the spot at the Hyatt there at Chicago O'Hare Airport.
Okay.
So
It's one of those.
from
Was it one of those
Ameritech, I
fly-in
went to
meetings where it's like, was it a fly-in meeting where it's like, hey, meet me at the airport so we can just make this a
right,
formality?
right. And the other thing, Jesse, about that one, that was at a time when they were, as a signing bonus, they were giving away, in this case, it was $10,000 signing bonus and 2,100 shares in stock options to incent me,
How you go wrong with that?
not say no. So how could I not? How could I say no? But that led me down a wonderful path with learning all the different philosophies of Jack Welch, which Jack really, after you hear him a couple times, you really then realize why so many people end up going through GE Capital, because of
Sure.
the knowledge and the depth of what they do. Just really, it's hard to beat. And got to stay with them for 6 years, until 2002, when the group that I was in, vendor finance, got merged in with commercial equipment finance, and they were a much larger organization within GE Capital. And you're either on one side of the equation, the merger or the mergee, and I happen to be on the wrong side of that equation. So that led me to go to Siemens, and I helped Siemens Finance in their medical division, doing a lot of MRIs and CTs for hospitals and emergency centers around the area. Did that for 3 years with them. And while at a major trade show, which we talked about earlier, that one of the gentlemen from TCF Equipment Finance was there walking around all of the different booths, and he actually tried to sell one of the sales reps that worked for me on equipment financing, and we had to tell him that, hey, we are the equipment financing group. And he's like, oh, I didn't mean anything by it. Oh, but by the way, do any of you guys need a job? And I just said, I at that point in time asked him, if he could step away, and I walked him out of the booth and then to the side, told him, I said, I'd be interested to hear what you have to say. So we set up a meeting later on, and next thing you know, I started working for TCF Equipment Finance. And then from there, 2008 came around. And 2008, as anyone in this industry knows, that's when all the lenders started shutting their doors, or a lot of times you'd see reps that had been with a company for 15, 20 years, all of a sudden without a job. And from that, that was kind of the time frame in which I realized that at that point in time in my age, which I was approaching 50, that, finding another company to work for was probably not in the cards, because, like I said, leasing companies were letting go of people rather than hiring. And at that point in time, I had a gentleman who was much younger than me. I think he was 32 years old, who then at that point, kind of said to me, he said, hey, you're the kind of guy I know that could do it on his own. And I'd be willing to help. And his name was Brad Com, and great with numbers. He was, he's certainly a CFO for somebody now. I can't remember the company name, but, I told him, I said, hey, you know what? I could use someone that has the knowledge of financials, tax returns, so that we can, determine whether or not these deals will be good or not. And he gave me the push I needed and started CPR Finance, which we are right now a month away from turning 14 years old.
Wow. Well, congratulations. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting times, right? It's kind of like, we'll reflect on this a little bit, in a little while in regards to what we're seeing now in the market. But, going from, GE being on that merger, being on that side of it. Yeah. It's not a good experience all the time. But sometimes it gives you that jolt to, I don't want to be in that situation again.
Right. Well, if you think about, especially from where I started, or when I started, you had 1987, which was Black Monday, when the stock market took its first 500-point hit. And at that point in time, once again, I mean, there were people jumping off of buildings at that point in time because they thought that was kind of the end of the financial world. Then you go from that to, I'm sure something happened in the 90s that I can't just remember right off the top of my head, but do remember the early 2000s, which the dot-com bubble burst. And I'll never forget sitting in one of the offices of WorldCom, because they were a Nortel distributor, and was there with a sales manager in his office. And we were sitting just chatting along. And next thing you know, you heard this ding on everybody's computer, which that ding represented an email coming in. And I'll never forget, as we were talking, he said, hold on a minute. And he was seriously looking at his computer screen. And I've never seen someone turn so white in my life. He matched the white Oxford shirt that he was wearing. It was the announcement that Nortel had just made that the SEC had frozen all their assets because they were being charged with double booking. So, however they were doing it, I don't know. But the bottom line is that I'll never forget his reaction to that email, which, for me, it was like I thought at that point in time, I guess that meant I was going to be losing my job because there I was supporting distributors whose assets are frozen.
Like what do you do at that point in time where it's like, I think we should go to the bar? Like,
Right.
I don't know
Right.
what's going. Like,
Well, while I didn't know what was going to take place then, that was really kind of the oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming type of thing that ended up causing my group to be merged in with the larger group because at that point in time, vendor finance was not going to be able to make its budget just simply for the fact, all of our
sure,
vendors now couldn't sell.
sure.
So that's what prompted me having to leave GE to go to Siemens. Um, Nothing that I can remember happening while at Siemens, but the last thing that happened was the portfolio crash in 2008 with TCF, and
Yeah.
I had lost my best vendor, what was doing 5 to 7 million with annually, because their portfolio had tanked. So it was like, okay, now what do I do? Well, I didn't want to become a greeter at Walmart or Home Depot at that point in time. So that was when I needed. That's when I needed that last push to get me to where I'm at today. And while we've gone through some stuff since, kind of like the pandemic, where at that point in time when they started talking about shutting down all brick and mortar businesses, the concern there is okay, maybe now is going to be the time where I'm going to have to actually think about a different career path, which, that's kind of the last thing you want to do when you're my age.
Yeah, and especially in Chicago, because you can't be a ranger on a golf course, 365 days a year. I might be able to get away with it out here.
Yeah.
But
No, that's not happening here. Yeah.
Let's talk about CPR Finance, if you don't mind. Your organization's 14 years old this year, or I guess almost going on 15 years old this year. And
no, it'd be 14 this year.
Oh, 14 this year. Okay. So what type of equipment, what type of verticals are you in? Size of your company, location, Ken?
Yeah. Well, I would tell you this. We came into it doing medical and technology.
Okay.
Obviously, as the industry sectors change, or in this case, being an intermediary / broker in the industry, one of the things we always have to do is go after lenders to try and enhance our portfolio of lenders to create better options, not only for our clients, but for myself, because one of the key things is that if I were to look to play in the sandbox that everybody plays in, I'm not going to be the one who's going to walk out with most of the deals, because there will be lenders that if they want the deal, they're going to lowball their price to get the deal.
Sure. Sure.
So one of the things that I learned in my years in the corporate world was that the likes of GE Capital, of Siemens, TCF, they never liked deals that were under $250,000. And I realized that's where the line was drawn for them, that if it was a deal under that, it wouldn't pass their sniff test, and I would have a greater advantage of being able to take the deal down. But obviously, as that continued, I'll say around, what was it, 2014, a buddy of mine who used to work for GE, when we used to work at GE Capital together, he had moved on and gone to several different lenders, the final one being Ascentium. And he called me up one day and said, I want to come work for you, and here's what you need to do in order to take down my business. And we negotiated through that and ended up signing him up as a rep. And he actually became one of our first reps to start working for us. So that being said, one of the things that he did was the transportation industry.
Okay.
which I had no familiarity with at all. And one of the things that you get to learn about the transportation sector is how to do title work. And title work for a lot of people is not fun.
No, and if you've told me that you figure out a way to streamline it and perfect it, let me know, because I think everyone would like to utilize that.
Yeah, I'd love to tell you that. I haven't perfected it over the years yet. So, and of course, as you know, of course, God forbid anything changes in the marketplace that where it would affect any truck drivers, because then that's a whole nother story that you get to deal with.
Sure.
But that all being said, it was after 2014. It was about 2016 where several of the vendors that we had originally brought on, you know, it kind of got to a love-hate relationship, because they would love you when you would get a deal done, but they would disown you if you couldn't get a deal done. And then hear, you know, some third-party leasing guy call them up and go, "Hey, we can get those deals done for you." And then they go ahead and send those deals in. Yeah, maybe they do get one of them done. So then it leads to that crack where they're like, "Well, you know, we're going to give him a little bit more of a try here because he did us a favor on a deal." So I always call them love-hate relationships. And one of the things that when people ask if, you know, there's any job openings, the first thing I ask them is, "Do you like roller coasters?" And you usually get that puzzled look on their face, because they're like, "Why are you talking about roller coasters in an equipment financing industry?" Well, the one thing you learn when you're in this business is that there's going to be a lot of hills, up and down, twists and turns. And, you know, if you don't like that kind of ride, then this is not the ride that you want to be on, because that's the kind of ride you get when you're in the equipment financing industry. The peaks and valleys, they're extremely high and extremely low. And you got to be able to maneuver around them and just understand that that's just going to be a part of what you're going to be working with. And I accepted that fact years earlier, and just knew when to catch, in most cases, when to catch those peaks and valleys, and hope that when you hit the peaks, that you've saved up enough money so that when the valleys come, whether or not you get deals in at that time or how many deals you get in at that time, you can still, you know, keep on going. And, you know, it's one of those where on top of it, you also learn what you are good at doing. And one of the things that, you know, that I really appreciate in this industry is the service side of it. You know, we were taught years ago how to service clients, how to let clients know that when you deal with someone like myself, that I'm going to be with you every step of the way. I'm not going to be behind an 800 voicemail tree where you got to punch option 1, you know, option 3, and then, you know, several other prompts before you actually get to someone live. So, you know, the one thing that I tell people is, look, my cell phone is maybe a foot away from me at any point in time during the day. If you need me, you call that number, and I guarantee you, if I don't answer, I will return your call within 45 minutes of your call. And people like it when they get service like that. And I think that's why CPR Finance is now going on 14 years old.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a differentiator, right? I mean, we're a service-related interest. Rate only gets you so far. I think some of the banks are especially seeing that now, because they've been competing on rate for so long. You know, and it's I finally went out on my own, because it was kind of one of those things where you're just tired of making other people money and being a cog in the wheel. And it's like, no, this is the way I am. I'm going to work harder than the next guy. I'm going to always be there. I'll be responsive. I'm going to tell you the truth, which sometimes people don't want to hear, the candid feedback, but that's just kind of all I really know, because otherwise, what are we really doing here, Ken?
Right. Exactly. I say that all the time.
And everyone's like, "Oh, I can relate to that." It's like, can you? What happens the first time you do it?
Yeah.
So
Look,
that's great.
there were numerous times, Jesse, I have to tell you that, it just seemed like this was not going to be for me. Um,
Sure.
but quite honestly, when you've been in it as long as I have, and even though I've seen the high highs and the low lows, the one thing that still keeps me coming back for more is having that opportunity to talk with a client, understand what they need, more importantly, allow them to know that if they follow any of the programs that I can offer them, that I will help make them a better company, but I'll also help them become more bankable so that if they need something that I can't help them with, that they're going to be able to get the best deal they're going to get. And
No,
that's been my belief, and it's what I think keeps CPR going.
absolutely. And it's at the end of the day, we're a handshake industry, right? So when you can sit there and some of these ideas that we come up with, those relationships that you build, and you can sit down, have a beverage, or break bread with somebody, that's what's meaningful to me, and that's why. I mean, this is my 18th year, so I don't have the amount of time in that you have, but I think from a personal belief and the relationship side of this, definitely we're aligned on that side of it, Ken.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the difficulties that we are facing in our industry as a whole now, is we've gotten away from that real aspect of it that's the differentiator. It for me, now once again being in my 38th year, a lot of the lender reps that I talk to, I basically see that I'll get new reps in and they have just come out of college, and then they turn around and ask me, hey, do you know about this, or can you tell me about this? Because they don't know, because they're not being trained on any of that.
Sure.
So the good news is that I'm at an age in my life where I'm ready to give back all the industry secrets that I had gained over the years, and willing to share that with people, because quite frankly, the days of the reason why I wasn't going to tell anybody was because that's how I was trained, that if you have the it factor, you don't give that to anybody, because then you're not separating yourselves from your competition. But at this point in time, what, I think that this industry will continue to move forward with me or without me, and more importantly, I'm just at an age where I feel like if you're willing to listen or learn, I'm willing to share and give.
Well, and at the end of the day, you have your it factor, I have my it factor. I don't mind sharing my it factor, because no one can replicate everything that I've done the last 18 years, right? You can sit there and I'll sit there and preach people about how to build their brand, what works for me, but what works for you is not going to work for somebody else. They have to go out and they have to figure out who they want to be.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's all about your integrity, right? As an individual, and are we doing the right thing? And one of the things I appreciate about this industry is if you do the right thing, you have a forever home in equipment finance. And with, mentors like you out there willing to share this knowledge, that goes a long way, because I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for some of the mentors that I've had in this space, Ken.
Well, much appreciated.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think. So what are your thoughts over like the last couple of weeks and what's been going on in the economy? I think probably since we spoke on the phone.
Right. No, I got to tell you, when the announcement popped up on my phone, all I could think of was, oh my, here we go again. Because that I can even go back as far as 1985, when the savings and loans were still a fairly big thing. You either went with the big boys or you'd put your money in the savings and loans, because they were usually attracting people because they were offering higher rates of return. Well, one day on my way to work, I happened to notice that there was a large crowd that had circled the building. And this was for a local savings and loan in the Maryland area. And so I ended up calling my wife to, say, hey, is there anything going on? Did you see anything in the newspaper that's going on over at the Federal Savings and Loan? And she said, no. Why? And I said, because there's a group of people there. They have circled the building. So they must be either having a star or someone big coming to their location to attract that many people. Oh no, it was depositors wanting to get into the bank to get their money back, and they had been told that the doors had been closed and that there did not appear to be a way to give the folks their money back. And they ended up, I think it was maybe 24 hours later, the local news team had covered it. And on the news, they had said that the owner of that particular savings and loan had fled the country, and
Great.
that and he abandoned it. He abandoned his mansion. And when they went in to show video of what was inside the mansion, it was, gold plated everything. I mean, he was taking, the owner of the Federal Savings and Loan was taking the deposits and just putting it in his own pocket, and left everyone, that had deposits there without the ability to get any of that money back. So from that to, in 2008, I didn't necessarily pay as much attention to that as I did when this announcement with SVB, because all of a sudden, first thing I thought was, all right, well, once again, the banks learned nothing from 2008. And, I thought, here we go again. But this time, my biggest concern is that who bails them out now? Because we already know, it's already been all over the news that, the federal government is basically broke. So it just was like, okay, well, this could be the big one. You just never know. But, I got to tell you, the one thing I certainly do know is that all of a sudden, every lender's philosophy from a credit perspective, well, that's changed quickly. And deals that they used to do or were used to doing, they're no longer doing. So
yeah, it's like the proverbial correction, because even before this last couple the events of the last couple of weeks, people have been tightening up a little bit because just kind of waiting for something. I say more of the banks, the independents, they're niche for the majority of the time. So they're on their path and everything else. But, we've had a slew of individuals and organizations that have joined this industry over the last, 5-8 years, and they've only seen this.
Yeah.
They've never been a part of that or the roller coaster. They're still going up. Yeah. So even COVID, you thought maybe this is it. And then it just took it even straighter up in the air. So the good thing, one of the things I appreciate about this industry, I got in 2005. So during 2008, 2009, I was still in my infancy stages there. Yeah. I've always been on the technology side, so it never really hurt me because I was on the technology side, Ken. But if anything, it flushes out the people that are doing things that they should not have been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. That whole thing that they shouldn't be doing brings me to, I don't know if you remember when you said 2005, it automatically made me think of Norvergence, which, if anybody in this industry has been there long enough, they all know that name pretty well. And all of the scam, that was the scam of the century. Just amazing how many lenders they ended up getting to pay out millions and millions of dollars on nothing.
Yeah.
But we're
So
still here. We are still here.
no, I mean it's what, $1.2 trillion industry still.
Yes.
And it's not going anywhere because the majority of people in this space or people you've done business with do things the right way.
Yeah.
We're all entrepreneurs, right? So there's always going to be people that kind of play on that bleeding edge of, should I be doing this? Do I really need to have this much liquidity for this scenario?
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and if people don't do the right thing, then this is what's going to happen. So
Right. Right. No, absolutely. And I got to tell you, Jesse, brings up another side of the business that I just recently have entered in with a buddy of mine, which is in the cannabis space. And, everybody, was like, oh my God, if cannabis goes legal, think of all the money that's going to be, spent in that industry. And it is surprising to hear some of the numbers that it already has created.
sure.
But what people now are not seeing or even caring to understand is that there are a lot of cannabis companies, especially on the growing side right now, who are all suffering because they thought that when every state would legalize, it would just mean exponential more revenues coming in based on how many plants can be grown and how many growing cycles they can get in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
the transportation
created,
between one state where it's legal and another
right.
state, because there's some people who are like, oh, we can grow it and do whatever we can here, but we can't transport it anywhere. So what's the point?
Right. And you can't bank yet, because it's still being considered a class 1 drug. But now what they are experiencing, California in particular, is that the growers have grown too much. And where they were expecting to get X amount of dollars per pound or per ounce, they're not getting anywhere close to that. And now
supply and demand.
when you're talking to those businesses are needing that liquidity to stay alive, now they're scrambling to try and find money, and not a lot of people are lending money in the cannabis space. So that's another new industry sector that's first of all, I never thought in a million years that I would ever see the day that it would become legal. So that in itself is a great piece of history that I'll keep in mind. But the amazing thing in this industry, in the cannabis industry in particular, is it's not cheap. It's not cheap to get into. It's not cheap to run. The equipment is unbelievably expensive. Sure. Especially if you're looking to get the biggest bang for your buck, you're going to spend at least $500,000 well, that's just the start of the equipment. If you're a grower, then you got the greenhouses and the lights and everything else. So you'll see that one of the things that I've tried to do, at least in my space, is stay flexible so that as one industry is starting to have a painful reminder of the past, that I still have the opportunity to do other things within the industry because of my areas of expertise. So when one goes down, hopefully another one picks up.
No, that's interesting. I never really thought about that from the cannabis sector, but to me, it's almost like economics. The more of something that you have, the lower the price is going to go.
Yeah.
There's not a lot about it. But I guess I never really thought about that. And especially if something's legal, maybe there's less of an appetite for it than if it's not, which is different psychology of things. But anyhow.
Topic for another day.
That's fantastic. So, I do ask everyone who comes on here to give me a little fun fact about themselves, or in the fact that you did broadcasting for 6 years of your life. What dogs? Sorry. Joys of working
Pause.
from home. Yeah, right. It's like, God, I just, anyhow, try to mitigate that, but run into it. What makes you tick outside of CPR finance and equipment finance, Ken?
Well, I will take you back to my radio days, because the radio days that I had originally was that I had the opportunity to interview as a disc jockey. I had the opportunity to interview numerous bands that were coming into the area which I was in, and it afforded me the opportunity to meet bands back then like Little River Band, Kool and the Gang, Asia. Oh man, I'm blanking out on some other names, but not only did I get to interview them, but then I got to be backstage at the concerts when they played.
Of course.
So it all of a sudden gave me a different perspective about what they do, how they do it, and more importantly, how they live. Because let me tell you, those were some interesting times. So one of the things that ended up doing for me, though, Jesse, was it made me appreciate bands that at that point in time were making albums, that if they could play their songs in concert like they play on the album, if it sounded as good as that, then you learn an appreciation for live music. And that's what caught me, and just it's driven me throughout my years. But I will tell you, in the last 2 years, in 2021, when everything kind of opened back up, I got to see 14 concerts. And then in last year, 2022, I ended up going to 18 of them. So,
wow.
I quite frankly, I love live music. I love it that a lot of the bands that I grew up with are still playing. The Styx, Loverboys, Foreigner, all of those bands that obviously put an impression in my life, whether it was just by listening to the music or relating to the words that they sang because it meant something to you.
Sure.
Man, I got to tell you, anytime I go to a concert and they perform well, to me, it's given me the opportunity to come full circle in my life, knowing that I've enjoyed live music since my first concert was 1974 when Rush opened up for Kiss at the Akron Civic Theater. I was a freshman in high school. I couldn't believe that my parents allowed me to go, especially I gotta believe if they would have known Kiss was wearing makeup and the garb that they were wearing back then, they wouldn't.
Or potentially what the acronym stood for. You never know.
But they allowed me to go, and from that point forward, live music has always been a major part of my life.
That's awesome. I might actually have Guns N' Roses tickets. They'll be here in Phoenix in October. Okay. So looking forward to that. What would you say is your most memorable concert?
Led Zeppelin, 1977. It was the last year that John Bonham had been alive. He took his life, which was a shame. But yeah, I got to see Led Zeppelin probably at their peak, which, that in itself, I don't know how many people ever got to go to a Led Zeppelin concert, but, there's what I didn't know as I'm going to concerts. I didn't know how many Led Zeppelin tribute bands are out there. It's amazing. It's amazing.
That's fantastic, Ken. And I guess, in closing here, at the end of the day, why should people do business with CPR Finance?
Well, Jesse, got to tell you, that's a question that I've been asked every year for the last 14 years. And that question has been answered by the following. If you've ever had an experience where you've gone to a lender and the lender ends up turning you down, where do you go when that happens? Do you go to the next lender that does the same thing as the first lender and find out from them that they end up saying the same thing, that we can't help you? Well, if you want someone to do that work for you, that's why CPR is out there, because when the banks say no, we can help them. We can help them with that, because we'll find a lender who will help us say yes. But more importantly, as I said earlier, that if the client is willing to follow the programs that we provide, then the biggest thing that I keep telling the client is, if you want to go back to that bank, get your next deal done, then you'll be able to do that because of the programs that we've worked, that we've worked together on to get you through it. However, one of the things that I didn't pay attention to was that when we provided the level of service after the first deal, then when their second deal came around, they instantly called us and said, "Hey, we'd like you to add this to our existing deal." And I was then in turn asking them a question, why? And their response is because when the bank said no to us originally and you found a way to get the deal done, why would we ever go back to the bank? They didn't want us the first time. Why would they want us now? And that was when I realized that we had actually had gone over and above our original business plan, to a point where we had to add that in, that we would be looking to work with clients to get repeat business. And I got to tell you, in the 14 years, I don't believe that there's been a handful of clients that haven't done more than one lease with us over the 14 years, which that I can only thank all of those clients that have worked with us, because they allowed us to do what we know we do best.
Well said. Well said, Ken. Do the right thing, do a good job, and the business will keep coming. So
exactly.
All right, sir. Well, I really appreciate your time today. Hopefully our paths cross at some point, over the next few months here. Never know. But
I will be out in
Phoenix.
I'll be out in Phoenix at the end of April.
Okay.
And I plan on looking you up.
All right. And that sounds great, sir. Well, I really appreciate your time today, Ken, and we'll be talking soon. Thank you.
Thank you.